What if the most important battle was won before a single shot was fired? Not with armies, but with a brilliant trick. This is the secret history of the con that changed the world. We're counting down the 7 greatest deceptions ever pulled, from the gift that destroyed a city to the ghost army that fooled a dictator. It's not about who had the biggest sword, but who told the best story. If you're ready for tales where a single perfect lie topples an empire, you're in the right place. Make sure you're subscribed. Number 7. Operation Mincemeat. How do you trick the most paranoid intelligence service in the world? You don't send them a spy, you send them a corpse. In the spring of 1943, the Allies faced an impossible task. Their next target, Sicily, was the most obvious objective in Europe. To prevent a massacre, they needed to make the Germans look elsewhere. The solution, born in a macabre London office, was a deception of breathtaking audacity. They took the body of a homeless man, Glinder Michael, and crafted a new identity. Major William Martin, a Royal Marines courier. They handcuffed a briefcase to his wrist containing forged letters from top brass stating the real invasion targets were Greece and Sardinia. But the genius was in the devastatingly human details. The pocket litter. They gave him a full life. Tender love letters from a fiancée named Pam, a receipt for an engagement ring, ticket stubs to a London show, and a stern notice for an overdraft. This fabricated mundane biography made the grand fiction utterly believable. A submarine released the body off the coast of Spain, a country crawling with Nazi informants. The method worked because it masterfully exploited the enemy's own psychology. The Germans didn't intercept a radio signal. They painstakingly uncovered a tragic secret. They forensically analyzed the personal effects, conducted their own autopsy, and proudly delivered the intelligence coup to Hitler, convincing themselves of its truth. They became the unwitting authors of their own strategic disaster. Convinced, Hitler personally diverted crucial panzer divisions to Greece. When over 160,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Sicily, weeks later, they achieved near-total surprise against a skeleton defense. The island was secured, saving countless lives and opening the path to Europe. The entire operation hinged on the most unlikely agent, a dead man who told a story so perfectly human, the enemy was desperate to believe it. Number 6. Operation Fortitude. What if the perfect army had no soldiers, and its deadliest weapon was a rumor? While thousands stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, the real victory was secured 200 miles away by an army that didn't exist. This was Operation Fortitude, a grand illusion where the Allies built an entire invasion force out of plywood and whispers. They created the fictional 1st U.S. Army Group led by General Patton. German spies sent home photos of inflatable tanks and reports of massive troop buildups around Calais. Every piece of intercepted intelligence was a carefully planted seed, and German high command nurtured it into an unshakable truth. For 7 crucial weeks after D-Day, Hitler held his most powerful panzer divisions in reserve at Calais, waiting for an attack from a ghost. Meanwhile, the real Allied forces secured their foothold in Normandy. The greatest invasion in history succeeded because the Allies didn't just hide their plan, they showed the enemy a better, more convincing story and let their own fears do the rest. Number 5. The Trojan Horse, the gift that murdered a city. What do you give the enemy that has everything? The one thing they can't refuse? Their own victory. For 10 years, the armies of Greece had broken against the walls of Troy. The greatest warriors were dead. Morale was ash. The war was lost. So the Greeks performed their final, brilliant act. They surrendered. They burned their own camps, boarded their ships, and vanished over the horizon, leaving the beach littered with the debris of defeat. And one last, strange artifact, a colossal wooden horse, an offering to the gods for safe passage home. This was the masterstroke. The method worked because it weaponized cultural piety and psychological relief. The horse wasn't just a trick. It was a sacred ritual object. To the Trojans, it was not a potential threat, but a divine sanction of their hard-won victory. After a decade of trauma, their minds were primed for a story of vindication, not suspicion. The Greek spy Sinon, left behind, sold the lie with a performance of tragic betrayal, sealing the deal. The exhausted, celebrating Trojans did the unthinkable. They tore down a section of their own legendary walls to drag the trophy inside. But the true genius was in the architecture of the lie. The Greeks didn't just hide soldiers in a statue, they hollowed out a god. They built a perfect, silent prison within a symbol of reverence. That night, while Troy slept in a drunken haze of triumph, the belly of the god split open. Odysseus and his men emerged not from a wooden shell, but from the heart of the Trojans' own belief. They slaughtered the guards, flung open the main gates, and signaled the fleet, which had only hidden behind a nearby island. Troy, which had withstood a decade of direct assault, fell in a single night to a story it was desperate to believe. The most unbreakable fortress is the human mind. To conquer it, you don't attack its logic. You fulfill its deepest desire. The Greeks gave Troy the narrative it craved, a glorious, God-blessed end, and in doing so, wrote the city's final chapter themselves. Number 4. Hannibal's fog of war. How do you defeat the world's most disciplined army? You don't. You make them defeat themselves. In the spring of 217 BCE, the Roman consul Gaius Flaminius was enraged. The Carthaginian invader, Hannibal, was burning the Italian countryside. With 25,000 of Rome's finest legionnaires, Flaminius chased him to the shores of Lake Trasimene. There he found Hannibal's camp, and beyond it, a narrow road shrouded in a thick morning mist. Seeking glory, Flaminius ordered his entire army to march into the fog-shrouded pass. What he could not see was that the hills above him were not silent. The night before, Hannibal had positioned his entire force, over 50,000 men, in perfect silence along the steep slopes. As the Romans snaked along the road, blinded and confined, they marched not into an ambush, but into a pre-built slaughterhouse. Hannibal waited until the last Roman soldier entered the pass before attacking. The fog that hid his army now hid the Romans' doom. They were attacked from the front, the rear, and devastatingly from the hills above. In 3 brutal hours, 15,000 Romans were killed. Hannibal lost only 1,500. He didn't outfight the Roman legion. He erased the battlefield it needed to function. By using the terrain and weather as weapons, he turned the Romans' greatest strength, their rigid discipline, into a fatal liability. Their orderly march became a death sentence, proving that the greatest general could win a battle before the first sword was ever drawn. Number 3, the Ghost Army, the sound of war. What is the true sound of an invasion? The roar of tanks or a perfectly timed recording? In the tense months after D-Day, the Allies had a new problem. They had broken into France, but were desperately outgunned. Their real tank divisions were needed for major assaults, leaving vast sections of the front perilously thin. The solution was not to bring in more soldiers, but to bring in artists, engineers, and sound technicians. This was the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, a secret unit whose mission was to create the illusion of an entire army moving through the countryside, using nothing but plywood, paint, and pure theater. They were masters of sonic deception. Using massive speakers mounted on trucks, they could project the precise, layered sounds of an armored column on the march. The grinding of tank treads, the roar of engines, the shouted orders of infantry, all from half a mile away. To German scouts peering through binoculars, they inflated hundreds of perfectly detailed rubber tanks and painted fake aircraft on fields. Radio operators filled the airwaves with the scripted, clumsy chatter of a real division setting up camp. They would roll into a quiet sector, create a week's worth of noise and movement, and then vanish overnight, only to reappear 50 miles away to do it again. The result was a profound strategic paralysis. German intelligence was utterly confused, reporting phantom armies appearing and disappearing across the front. Commanders, believing they were facing massive reinforcements, held their own units in place, afraid to move. This allowed the real, hard-hitting Allied spearheads to attack weaker points with devastating effect. The Ghost Army staged over 20 such deceptions, their greatest weapon being the enemy's own imagination. They proved that in modern war, perception could be manufactured, and the most convincing soldier could be one made of sound and air. Number 2. Zhuge Liang's empty city. What do you do when 15,000 enemy soldiers are at your gate and your own army is 100 miles away? In the Three Kingdoms period of ancient China, the brilliant strategist Zhuge Liang faced a nightmare scenario. He was overseeing the vulnerable city of Cheng with a mere 100 civilian clerks and officials. His veteran army was far away, unable to return in time. On the horizon, dust clouds signaled the approach of Sima Yi, a cunning general with a force of 150,000 elite troops. Surrender meant execution. Flight was impossible. With no soldiers to fight and no walls to hide behind, Zhuge Liang chose a different path. He threw open the city's massive gates wide. He ordered the few old men in the city to sweep the streets, appearing as humble street cleaners. Then he ascended the watchtower, lit incense, and began calmly playing his guqin. Sima Yi's vanguard arrived, expecting to storm the walls. They found a scene of impossible serenity. The great strategist sat alone, plucking the strings of his instrument without a care in the world. The tableau was so illogical, so audaciously confident, that it screamed of a trap. Sima Yi, a master of warfare who knew Zhuge Liang's reputation for brilliant ambushes, halted his army. He listened to the music, studied the empty streets, and concluded that the open city was a lethal snare, that legions of archers must be hidden in the buildings, waiting to descend on his troops the moment they entered. Fearing a catastrophe, he ordered a full and immediate retreat. Zhuge Liang had saved his city and his life with nothing but a masterful performance, turning his greatest weakness into his ultimate weapon. Number 1. Soviet Maskirovka and the Great Surprise. How do you hide the largest military offensive in history? By the summer of 1944, the German army on the Eastern Front was braced for a massive Soviet attack. Their intelligence was certain it would come in the south against Army Group North Ukraine, where terrain favored tanks. Stalin and his generals, however, had a different plan. A gigantic offensive to annihilate the stronger Army Group Center in Belarus. The operation, named Bagration after a Georgian prince, would involve over 2 million men. To move this colossal force into position without alerting the Germans, the Red Army executed a masterclass in Maskirovka, the art of military deception. Every action was a double bluff. While secretly massing armies in Belarus, the Soviets created a phantom force in the south. They built dummy tanks and planes from wood and canvas. Fake radio networks buzzed with scripted traffic about fuel shortages and troop movements toward Ukraine. Real tanks moved only at night, their tracks carefully swept away at dawn. They even allowed German reconnaissance planes to fly over key areas, but only after positioning the flimsy decoys perfectly. The deception was so complete that when the preparatory bombardment for Operation Bagration began on June 22, 1944, German frontline commanders were stunned. Their high command, still convinced the main blow was coming elsewhere, refused to release reserves. Within weeks, Army Group Center was obliterated, with over 300,000 soldiers lost. The Soviets advanced over 400 miles, further in 2 months than the Allies had from D-Day. The victory was secured not just by force, but by a lie that convinced the enemy to look the other way at the moment of truth. And that's how history's greatest tricks were pulled off. Not with bigger armies, but with bigger lies. If your mind is now permanently suspicious of suspiciously nice gifts and foggy weather, you're one of us. Subscribe so you don't miss the next time we expose how a con artist changed the world. Until then, stay clever and maybe double-check that wooden horse in your backyard.